This is Scott Loveridge with the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development. I'm pleased to be your host and moderator today. Our speaker today is Innisfree McKinnon with the University of Wisconsin-Stout, and she's just completed a postdoctoral consultancy with the center in preparation for starting her new job at Wisconsin-Stout. She came to this region from out west, and so she's new to the region, and I think she's getting a warm welcome. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, and it's free.
All right, thanks very much, Scott. And everybody hear me all right?
I hear you great.
Okay, good. So thanks very much. Yeah, I came out here from Oregon, where I was doing research on land use and agricultural issues, and where agritourism is just really growing and impacting rural land uses. So that's what kind of prompted me to get interested in this topic and investigating it here in Wisconsin. So I hope that my experiences talking to farmers in Wisconsin will be useful to folks in other places here. So just before I get started with what I did, I want to talk a little bit about agritourism research in the US. And I think it sounds like most people know agritourism is a growing area for farmers to get into, but it's still relatively a small number of farms in the U.S. that participate in agritourism activities when you compare it to places like Europe, where agritourism has been encouraged for quite a while now by policy measures. And so the research into agritourism in the US is relatively new, and there's not a ton of sources of data out there. There's a lot of state level surveys of farmers who are involved in agritourism. And then there's the US Census of Agriculture, which started collecting data on agritourism in 2002. And I'll talk a little bit about the limitations of that data from my perspective anyway. And please feel free to stop me if you have any questions or comments as I go along. So here is a map of the US Census data from 2007 with a number of agritourism farms in different counties in the US. And this is very, in my mind, is very limiting, because what they're really asking when they ask this is farms that had income directly from agritourism. So some kind of farm tour or hunting operation, something that directly is agritourism income. But it does show that it's growing. You can see 2002. Let's see if I can draw this. So, trying my little pointer here. Here we go. So number of farms in the US in 2002, number in 2012, and especially growing amounts of revenue over the different census dates. And you can also see, let's see if I can get this, there's definitely sort of clusters of activity. Oh, I forgot to say, I'm a geographer, so I love to look at geographic variation in activities. You can see out west, there's a lot of activity in the Northeast. And in the region that I'm studying, Michigan and Wisconsin are a little bit of a darker area, showing more agritourism activity. And I participated in some research with some folks in Wisconsin on the local food movement, comparing between Wisconsin and Oregon last year. And so I was interested in how agritourism was developing in Wisconsin and potentially links to the local food movement or other kinds of specialty marketing activities. All right, so the other thing I want to cover, which folks may or may not know, is how the research looks at benefits from agritourism. And one of the things is there's a lot of focus in the research in the US so far on the potential for agritourism to keep land in agriculture. And additional revenue for family farms. I think most of us probably already know that that there is increasing polarization in terms of farm sizes, with very large farms, very small, tending to be hobby type farms or retirement farms, and mid-sized farms that are for full-time farming are often squeezed out in many parts of the US. So I think that's what the research has really focused on, is that the potential for agritourism and specialty marketing to keep farms in farming and to provide income for family farms. But I want to also emphasize that what I found in my research is a much more varied picture in terms of the potential benefits and potential challenges in terms of agritourism, and particularly on the positive side, there's potential, I think, for new revenue streams for new farmers. And I think most of you know that there's a lot of challenges for new farmers in terms of accessing land and capital. So that's a positive benefit that I found in my research. And also, but there's also things like agritourism puts a lot of pressure on farms to manage this new enterprise. And so oftentimes that means transitioning out of farming being your main activity, or agritourism can also be related to farmers retiring or farm succession. So there's a diversity of sort of responses by farmers in terms of why they're adopting agritourism strategies. And it's not just keeping land in agriculture. There's a variety there. And the other thing I want to mention here is the research has shown more participation in conservation by farms that are involved in agritourism. So that's another potential benefit from the existing literature. All right. So the other thing I want to talk about before I get to my research is defining agritourism. Most research done on a survey level defines agritourism as activities that take place on a working farm and that generate income directly from agritourism. And I think that's not necessarily a mistake, but I think it misses a lot of the variety of agritourism enterprises that are out there, and potentially by missing some of that activity, you kind of are less able to understand the entire pattern of what's going on in particular places. So for my study, I actually looked at both farms that were involved in agritourism where they were charging money for, farm tours or events, and then also other activities that brought customers to farms that were then direct marketed. So sales or sales of specialty products, or there was a lot of farm stays where you might not count that as direct agritourism income, but the main activity was really being on a farm. So for my study, I looked at farms, activities that brought customers or visitors to farms, and where the main attraction was farming customers.
Quick question.
So, yeah.
If just kind of to provide an example, type, I would wonder if the following scenario would fit as agritourism.
Okay.
I've got a winery and I have a tasting room, and my main goal is not particularly sales to people who take a case away after they taste, but building a customer base that where they'll come back or they'll order it online or something for many, many years after that initial taste. Is that agritourism or not?
Yeah. So in my mind, that for this study, I would count that, and that would be somebody that I would be interested in interviewing and talking to. So here, I'll give you, on this chart here, I'll give you some examples of kind of the range of businesses that folks that I interviewed. So your example was vineyards and wineries with tasting rooms. So yeah, oh yeah, there you go. So in Wisconsin, there's a lot of vineyards popping up and all over with tasting rooms. And if it involves bringing people to the place where there is agriculture going on, I would count it as agritourism for the purposes of this study. That's partially because of this chart here and what I'm interested in. So it might be too wide of a definition for some folks, but I think it's really hard to pull apart what counts as agritourism versus what counts as direct marketing or on-farm sales. A lot of people I talked to had trouble feeling like they could charge for things like tours, but incorporated those things into their plan for their business so that they didn't have to charge for them. And
mention too that if folks do have questions, please put them in the chat box, and I'll make sure that Innisfree has a chance to consider them.
Yeah, I would love to hear. So I'm coming at this from a background in geography where we talk a lot about how the rural landscape is changing. Yeah, let me know if you're having trouble with the audio. I see that. How the rural landscape is changing and what kinds of activities are appropriate on the in rural space. Is anybody else having, yeah, because John's asking if anyone else is having trouble with the audio.
You're coming through fine with me.
Okay. So this is sort of the continuum that I made up in terms of use of rural space in relationship to farming versus more recreational activities. So oftentimes in geography, we talk about production-oriented activities versus consumption-oriented activities. And really what consumption-oriented activities means is the recreational use of rural space and the consumption of the experience of being out in a rural area. And what I found in my study was a sort of a mix of people that were oriented more towards the tourism aspect, the consumptive uses of the landscape, and towards people that were involved in some way in agritourism on the production side. Let's see if I can. So people, hold on, I can get this. So people over here who had some involvement in agritourism, but really were production-oriented farmers, to people whose main activity was really agritourism and farming was sort of a side activity that they were involved in. And there was a range of folks, and looking in my interviews, I basically looked at this range and how people manage that that dichotomy, I guess. Okay, I'm going to move on to my next slide here. Okay, so I'm getting to my methods. So I did geospatial analysis. I looked at the existing census data and combined it with some other data that I was able to get for counties in Wisconsin to try to do a hotspot analysis, see which counties in Wisconsin had more agritourism activity, and also what factors related to farms, farm types, landscape, population might be related to more agritourism activity. And then I also did qualitative analysis, and I picked out 3 case study counties to look at, and then interviewed mainly farmers, but also some key stakeholders in terms of what kinds of agritourism activities were taking place in these communities, and particularly with the farmers, as much detail as I could get about how they were organizing their business, how were they managing agritourism activities versus production activities, how did they work out the labor involved, how did they get involved with it, what did they like or not like about it. So very broad interview with farmers. And then as much as I could observed community events and what other kinds of tourism was going on in the area, that kind of thing. So here's a couple of maps from 2012 census data of agritourism in Wisconsin. So the map, let's see if I can get this. Okay, so the map on the left here is simply, I can't get the little pointer to work, but somebody else has got it. The map on the left there is simply number of farms in Wisconsin that in these different counties that have reported agritourism income. And so you can, the darker blue is more farms. And then on the right is analysis using GIS to find hot spots. And what this is not only counties that have a lot of agritourism, but if they have a lot of agritourism and the other counties around them also have a lot of agritourism, then they get counted as a hotspot. Those are in the red and pink. And then the blue is areas with very little agritourism, northern Wisconsin, more forested, less agritourism activity. So that's sort of number of farms. And then the next slide is dollars per farm. So which counties on the left there have, on average, the farms that are involved in agritourism are reporting more income versus less. And you can see a hotspot cluster on the right there in between Madison and Milwaukee. You can see Door County is getting a lot of agritourism income. So I was starting out trying to understand these patterns and see what activity was happening in different areas. All right. So I picked out 3 case study counties, and actually these had somewhat to do with my looking at the census data, but it also had to do with talking to extension agents about what activity was going on. So all 3 of these counties were counties where extension agents and local people that I talked to reported that there was people actively organizing agritourism activities and events. And so we've got sort of a range. Vernon County in the census data comes out very high, and Greene County actually comes out with very low agritourism activity. And so I was actually really curious to go there and see what was going on, because I had talked to some folks about this group that was actively organizing agritourism in the area. So I was like, okay, well, obviously the census isn't catching all of this activity. Okay, so quickly, I'm just going to go through this a little bit. I'm not going to go through all of my detailed regression analysis because it's still tentative, but the regression analysis found correlations, statistically significant correlations, small but statistically significant, to more water in the county. I think a lot of tourism in Wisconsin is water related, so more water access in the county, more other tourist business and development. And actually, this is a little bit, you might think this is counterintuitive, but proximity to urban centers was negatively correlated, slightly negatively correlated, whereas direct marketing activities were positively correlated with being adjacent to urban centers. So this is another little mysterious point, but and then farm characteristics being having lots of direct marketing in the county and then having a lot of farms experiencing losses. So I sort of take that as farms who are engaging in direct marketing probably also are more likely to engage in agritourism activities. And then I think diversifying into agritourism is one strategy for farms that are experiencing losses. So that those two things make a lot of sense. So from my qualitative interviews with folks, I'm just listing a few things that seemed to correlate, and I haven't put them into a regression analysis yet. But hills and certain topography, I think, was definitely something that seemed to be an attractive feature that people talked about. Lack of development pressure, I think that might be directly related to the negative correlation with proximity to urban centers. And then, but then on an individual level, a lot of farmers talked about, being located near highways or busy roads to attract consumers. So I didn't find a correlation with highways, but people talked about that as an important factor. And then in southwestern Wisconsin, there's a higher percentage of farmland that is hilly and not great directly for cultivation. And so I think that relates to experiencing farm losses, having land that you're not using, that you can then take advantage of that for its scenery values. And then in all the communities, there was active groups that were organizing in around these issues. And particularly in Greene County, there was supportive local regulation and zoning. So hopefully I'll touch on that a little bit later. All right, so now I'm going to talk about farmer motivations and orientations and a few of the issues involved. So one of the things I noticed right away was that even production-oriented farms, under my definition of agritourism, are involved. This is, on the right here, is part of the Larson Acres webpage. This is a large dairy farm actually in Rock County, which is next to Greene County. They're super involved in doing dairy breakfasts and being involved in the community. And I think the more production-oriented farms that I talked to were really interested in educating the public about farming, managing public perceptions. This is might be called a CAFO, managing public perceptions around farming, promoting the dairy industry or whatever industry, being involved in community traditions. And this is one of the pieces that I was most interested in, is this sort of contested values around representing farming. In Wisconsin, there's a lot of consolidation around the dairy industry, and I think the larger, more production-oriented farms have this sense that they need to manage the perception around the larger farms. So oftentimes they're involved in some agritourism activities, even if it's only on an occasional basis. Okay, so one of the things that I found from talking to farmers was a number of folks who were transitioning away from production-oriented activities, but wanted to stay on the farm or wanted to preserve the land for agriculture and really wanted to honor their family's heritage in farming. Let's see if there we go. So one person I talked to who ran a wedding barn said this. She said, so this was how the weddings got started. It was a way to make money to fix up the buildings. This is a beautiful old farm, and we wanted to keep that up. So it wasn't really about the money. So that was one of the things that a number of people talked about was the heritage tourism aspect of it. And there were also a number of for their customers around farming.
And it's free. Ronnie B. from University of
Oh, yeah.
Minnesota Extension wanted to know if your sample had more production or consumption-oriented farms.
I would say probably there was more of a tilt towards consumption-oriented farms, but there was definitely some folks who were CSAs. I included CSAs in the sample, who are often involved in some kind of marketing or agritourism activity as part of their CSA. And those folks are often more production oriented, even though you might not think that. And then some new farmers who really just wanted to be farming and to be making income from whatever their chosen production activity was, but were using agritourism as a way to get that income stream going to start out. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of the folks I interviewed talked about trying to balance production farming activities with the needs of tourists. And I thought this was a great picture. This is Greene County Farm Tour Day, where the farmer is talking to one visitor who is then filming her talking. And this is something that a lot of people talked about, is just needing to have new skills to work with the public more, to be comfortable with sharing your farm and with learning new things and working with the public in a way that I think a lot of farmers just aren't that comfortable with. And then, working with state and local regulations to try to figure out all of the activities you might need to be regulated on, basically, or all the permitting involved. Okay. So benefits for farmers. I think I talked a little bit about this. Income for farm succession. So oftentimes folks were talking about their children wanted to go into farming, but the farm wasn't currently producing enough income to support more than one household. So helping out with generating more income. I think one of the benefits too is oftentimes it's the women who were involved. My sample involved a large number of women who were primarily involved in the more working with customers activities or producing value-added products. And then, like I said, revenue for new farmers. There were a number of folks who were involved in sort of informal bed and breakfast activities, like through Airbnb, or the other website is Vacation Rental by Owner, who were using the revenue from the farm stay business to support the farm while they were building up the revenue from the farming activity. So this is somebody who was talking about their farm stand and how the kids wanted to join them, and so they worked out new activities that they could do, expanding the business so that they could support more people. Oh, somebody is saying, what about liability insurance issues? So in Wisconsin, some people did talk about, I think I might talk about that in a second, but some people did talk about liability issues for hosts and visitors. And actually, a few people talked about reducing their farming activities because they were worried about the liability involved. But Wisconsin just passed a law that involves putting up some signage, basically, that says farmers, agritourism is inherently dangerous and you're taking some risk, we're not liable, basically. And there's a direct wording. I don't think I have any pictures of that sign, although I took pictures of it in a lot of places. So quickly, a lot of farmers talked about the challenges of opening private farm spaces, of balancing competing demands, and just a sense of that their farm was a place that was special to them, and would visitors treat it the way that they wanted it to be treated and respect it. And so those were some of the challenges I heard from people in terms of trying to decide how much agritourism they wanted to get involved with and in what forms. The other thing I heard a lot was particularly from CSAs about the pressure on CSAs to build community, to build that customer base, and the frustration that they were expected to give a lot of farm tours, to host farm dinners, to be involved in a number of different ways, and they what effect? Okay, and they were sort of challenged by that, and really sometimes just wished that they could just farm. Okay, what affected the quality of the internet connection on their? Oh, that's a good question. About internet connectivity. A lot of the farmers I talked to seem to have good internet connectivity. There were some folks who were using, I don't know what you call, now I'm trying to remember what the name of that is, where you can use your cell phone to do the cash register and that kind of thing. So that's a good question. I did not ask that of community members, but I know Viroqua has really good internet connectivity. Greene County also is adjacent to Dane County, so I think there is pretty good internet connectivity on all of those things. But I'm not sure I asked specifically about internet connectivity. I asked specifically about how people were marketing, and many people, virtually everyone was marketing through the internet and social media. Okay. So there's certain agritourism operators who really embrace just providing an experience for their customers. This is Hawks Mill Winery in Greene County, and these folks were having a really good time. You can see all the bottles of wine they were having. Wineries in Wisconsin, their marketing strategy seems to be largely agritourism related, in that the main thing they're trying to provide is an experience for their customers, bring them out to the vineyard, provide them with a beautiful view and lovely, afternoon or evening looking at the vineyard and enjoying the space. They're marketing, or they're selling the vineyards and wineries I talked to, they're selling very little through selling to restaurants or other grocery stores, that kind of thing. So they're really, the other folks who really embraced agritourism, in my experience, were people providing farm stays often, and wedding barns. There's tons of wedding barns everywhere in Wisconsin. Okay. So I think I'm going to try to finish up here and give time for questions soon, but one of the things I looked at was how agritourism remakes farm spaces, requires building of new facilities or remodeling of existing facilities. I think communities really need to think about that in terms of how do we facilitate the activity that we want, and reduce potential conflicts with neighbors. So one winery owner was really great. This quote is basically, he went around before the winery opened. He talked to all of his neighbors about the winery, and he, encouraged everyone to be involved in the planning of this. But once it opened and there were noises coming from the winery, music or just car noises, one neighbor in particular was just super frustrated, and they have had to kind of modify their activities. So connections with your neighbors and figuring out what's appropriate for your particular rural space is one thing I heard a lot about. Okay, so I'm going to just talk briefly about communities. This, I am more in the process of writing this part up and getting enough information from each of the communities to talk in more detail about this. But I think it's something that we haven't talked about as much, but I think there's a lot of potential for agritourism and to be linked to heritage tourism and food-related tourism activities in the rural spaces that just really weren't working. And so I think there's potential there for additional revenue for communities, support for farmers, preservation of rural heritage, potentially jobs. I think that needs more research, but economic development while keeping rural character by partnering farmers with local communities. Okay. I think on the other hand, there's some communities and community leaders that I talked to had some concerns about the potential challenges that, tourism was going to bring a kind of development that they weren't really interested in, that it was going to bring traffic and noise, and outsiders potentially with different values and interests. And so one of the challenges for a lot of communities and for farmers who were trying to organize agritourism activities was getting buy-in from other businesses in the community. This is a bike shop and hotel in Brodhead, which is in Greene County, and they went out of business because they couldn't. They really wanted to kind of build up the local food scene, build up connections with farmers, bring folks out who were interested in biking and outdoor activities, and they couldn't get enough buy-in from other folks in the community to support their business. Okay, so I'm just going to say briefly, there were a few characteristics in my communities that I thought were encouraging agritourism in the region or in those particular counties, and one was strong food and heritage tourism. Particularly Greene County is well known for Swiss heritage activities, beer and cheese related tourism. And then in Vernon County, there's a really large concentration of organic farming and interest in local foods, and I think that is really a strength for them. They also have a large Amish community, and that brings out a lot of people, even though the Amish aren't always happy about it. And then Vernon County has this strong place-based identity, where the driftless region is something that county really embraces and does a lot of tourist marketing around that identity. And then Greene County is an area, I don't know, probably folks who aren't from Wisconsin or aren't from this area don't know it, but Greene County or Sauk County is right next to this place called the Wisconsin Dells, which is a huge, it started out as tourism around rivers, the river there, but now it's a huge water park. So it has this 100 or more year history of tourism development. So having that strong tourism cluster, and then now they have a really strong arts community in the area. So I think I'll maybe just stop here and then give time for questions. So one of the things I looked at was going to as many events as I could, and each of these communities were organizing different events. This one right here is called Bike the Barns. So it's a bike tour along with to visit different farms in the county, and it involved stops with farm to table type meals. There's also the Driftless Folk School, which teaches sort of traditional activities like beekeeping, farming related activities. They have events. In Greene County, there's the Soil Sisters Weekend, which is a whole weekend full of farm tours and farm dinners and farm educational events. And then coming up in October, I'm going to attend this in Sauk County, the Fermentation Fest and Farm Art Detour, which is a art tour through the county where the art is located on the farms. So if you haven't heard of this activity, I would encourage you to check it out as a model for agritourism related event that brings something like 10 or 12,000 people to visit that county over a 2-week period. It's a really great model for bringing people to a rural area. Okay, so I am going to skip ahead and just get to you guys' questions, and I encourage you all to look me up and ask me more later as well.
I think there was a question from Michelle Cousineau in North Carolina, wanted to know about liability and commercial visitors. So I don't know if you know the answer to that.
Commercial, what, I'm not sure what she means by commercial visitors.
So it's a homeowners insurance. Does normal homeowners insurance cover people who are coming to visit you as
Oh,
customers
yeah.
to a?
Yeah, so I pretty sure that that regular homeowners insurance would not cover them. My understanding is the law in Wisconsin is supposed to help reduce risks for liability, but most of the people I talked to had other insurance, I believe, and this is an issue because there's a number of people I talked to who were doing farm stays in a way that was probably not 100% legal. Um, so they are doing it through Airbnb and they're not necessarily licensed. And so I think that there's definitely potential liability there that maybe folks aren't thinking about. Yeah. Oh, local regulation. Um, so a lot of people I talked to were frustrated by local regulation, and not just local regulation, but the um, the diversity of regulations they were expected to know and different agencies they were expected to somehow get connected up with so they could get the right permitting. So one of the things in Greene County, I think Greene County has a really good model for planning and zoning to permit agritourism. They just redid their county plan and they specifically put agritourism activities in there as permitted so that they could reduce people's need to get conditional use permits. So I think that's the kind of regulation that I saw. And then I think the other thing that's not really regulation, but having local tourism councils and extension agents that could help direct people to needed resources. One of the problems I think when we talk about agritourism, and my study probably didn't help this because I defined it so broadly, but even if you defined it more narrowly, there's just so many different kinds of businesses that it's very difficult for someone getting started to know exactly who to talk to about what. And a lot of folks talked about trouble, trying to figure out how to get permitted. Yeah, I think that's probably all I can say about that.
Well, Connie, I think you missed a question from Connie about how do they market to or reach their
Oh,
audience?
yeah. Yeah, so um, almost everyone that I talked to, I did ask them about marketing, and almost everyone talked about marketing by largely by word of mouth, but largely through the internet and social media. And like I said, for people doing farm stays, uh, Airbnb, it was almost like you could get business without, you just list your farm and immediately you're booked up. The other one that I thought was really interesting was um, people doing weddings or events at wedding barns got on social media through things like Pinterest. I don't know if everyone knows about Pinterest, but that was something that the people that I talked to were just filled up with reservations because there were folks photographing weddings, and then that was uh, multiplying across the social media, going viral or whatever. People did talk about print marketing, getting involved in things like like a wine trail or those kinds of things, but they seem to be secondary, and a lot of people were cautious about spending a lot of money on that kind of print marketing. Would you consider a mud fest? Um, oh, that's great. Um, yeah, so this is one of my questions, because I feel like, in doing my research, I looked at a lot of different resources that are out there, but since the regulation is often local or state regulation, if you've got a guide that has to do with liability, is that going to be something that is going to be applicable to another state or another locality? There was a lot of, yeah. So related to the local regulation thing, there was a lot of folks who basically said that county by county, what regulations were enforced varied a lot and how they were enforced. So some counties were much more interested in promoting agritourism and uh, facilitating it, compared to places where regulators were doubtful and not supportive, basically. Oh, that's cool.
Great,
Um,
we're getting a
yeah.
great comments in here, and I did put up the evaluation, so if you haven't clicked through that, please do so as we listen to the additional questions and answers coming through the system.
Yeah, and I particularly was looking, I picked counties that were outside of cities, but obviously on that map of Wisconsin, one of the largest counties that had the most agritourism is Dane County, which is where Madison is. So there's definitely, somebody earlier said something about agritourism more in towns and cities, and I think that would be something interesting to look at. I think that's where different types of agritourism activities seem maybe to have different.
We're on the line from Extension. I'm wondering, are any of you, and I was very intrigued by Innisfree's comment about the need to develop communication skills, and if you're working in the agritourism space with Extension, is that something that you've thought of doing? I know most Extension services offer some training to new staff on how to stand in front of a camera and make sense and things like that, but I'm not sure that we do that for stakeholders very much. And what do you guys think of that? Well, attendees are typing, so I assume that they're reacting. So another thought is Innisfree is here in the region, and so she's eligible to apply for a small grant from the center to continue some of this work and maybe develop some more outreach type things, but she would need a partner from elsewhere in the region, from a land grant elsewhere and from another state. So if you are interested in that, maybe put in an email address or follow up with her afterwards. And I'm not sure if she wants to do it, but that's something to think about. Yeah, we will be issuing that call here shortly, so that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks. So look for that.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting that the agritourism, one of the things I've been interested in is just how much women were involved in the agritourism, and how much those social skills tend to be gendered. it wasn't always the case, but it really brings the sort of dynamic of the farm into something different. Have the women highlight, and that's the other place that I think maybe the research is missing some of the agritourism activity. So if the farm wife is running the bed and breakfast, then does the farmer count that as farm related income? I'm not sure. I feel like there's a lot of agritourism activity that's being missed in the census. Mm.
Oh, we still have people typing, so I'll just let that continue on. I do want to thank you very much for your work, and I think it's very interesting, and look forward to seeing the more formal pieces as you start to target some of the journals you're looking at for your work.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's a national. Yeah, so we have in Wisconsin, we have the Wisconsin Agritourism Associate. Wait, it's WADA. And we have a very active Wisconsin Agritourism Association, um, and a few other associations that people talked a lot about. So I know those have been really helpful to a lot of the folks that I talk to. Yes, thank you. Wisconsin Agritourism Association. I'm saying it wrong. Yeah, so please feel free to contact me if you have more information or more questions, because I would love to hear. This is hopefully just the start of my research in Wisconsin on agritourism and rural development issues. So
And I have to run to a different event here, but I'll just let this run, and it's free if you want to stick around. That's fine.
yeah,
And then Rosa will shut it down when it's finally over. But great comments, everybody, and lots of nice participation. So thanks for being on today.
yeah. Thanks everyone for coming and joining me. I feel like it'd be great to have a conversation with the entire group, because I think there's probably a lot of expertise out there. Oh yeah, and I've seen a lot of people are posting some links. I've seen a lot of these links before and looked them up in my literature searches. So yeah, these are great resources.